I'm Matt Reynolds, and this is my podcast.
I can do the job, but running the business is quite difficult. What a lot of tradesmen lack, and I was probably one of them, is business skills.
I don't mind making mistakes. You learn from your mistakes.
Information is all around you in the minds of people that work beside you.
Welcome back to the Trench Talk podcast. I'm your host, Matt Reynolds, and today I spoke with Gabriel Pinchev, the founder and CEO at FieldPulse. FieldPulse is field service software that acts as a digital hub for running your entire contracting business from a single app. The idea of these discussions, for those of you joining us for the first time, is to go into the trenches of achievement and talk not with people who are orchestrating from some lofty perspective, but to those high performers who are actually in the trenches, honing their craft. That has included guests from the worlds of business, sport and entertainment, all of whom are on the front lines doing amazing things. Gabe's background is in the technology sector. After working with multiple contractors and seeing the amount of handwritten paperwork they were sending out and not getting paid for, Gabe started FieldPulse to help contractors keep track of their businesses and get paid faster. Today, he continues to talk to customers and prospective customers daily to keep up with the latest industry trends and issues in the contracting world. In March of 2019, FieldPulse announced they had raised $2.2 million, led by Capri Ventures and Apple Core Holdings, along with other notable investors. FieldPulse's success includes high triple-digit user growth over the last year, significant additions to its service and product line, announcements of key partnerships with platforms like GPS Insight, and being named to Capterra's list of the 20 most affordable field service management software solutions. This funding will enable FieldPulse to further build on its exceptional growth to date and to continue to drive rapid disruption as legacy contractors migrate to digital platforms. During our chat, we covered a lot, including providing free quotes and why Gabe believes it's bad for the entire industry, technology, including developments in the mobile and GPS space, customer expectations, customer experience, why knowing the numbers within your business is so important, building apps, raising money, and as always, much more. To contact Gabe directly, head to LinkedIn and search his name. And to learn more about FieldPulse, go to fieldpulse.com. If you enjoyed Trench Talk, head to xrm.com.au/podcast and opt in for the newsletter. We'll make sure you're notified when every new episode of the show is released. Trench Talk is available everywhere good podcasts are served. So if you're feeling super nice, please leave a review, comment, rating, or whatever your chosen podcast platform allows. Enjoy this chat with Gabriel Pinchev. Gabe, thanks for doing this.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Matt.
Now, I am in my home office here in Melbourne, Australia this morning, and it is the morning. It's not morning for you, I know. So where do you come to us from today?
I'm in our headquarters in Dallas, Texas, here at 5:40 p.m. So evening for us, morning for you. I've gotten used to it now dealing with Australia.
Yeah, I bet. It is a challenge at times, that's for sure. So I thought we might start with your thoughts on doing free quotes or free estimates, as you say, in the United States, and why you think that does actually hurt the industry as a whole.
Sure. So this is something that I have a pretty strong opinion on across the board. And like Matt said, we call them estimates, but in our system specifically, we even let you change the quotes, bids, proposals, really whatever you want to call them, but whatever you're offering to the customer to give them an idea of what the service will be. I think there's a bit of nomenclature difference between whether it's a rough estimate or a hard quote or bid. But regardless, it's the idea of doing free estimates or free quotes that I think is problematic for the industry as a whole. On the contractor side, I think it hurts everyone across the board. And unfortunately, I don't think there's an easy way to wiggle out of it until people start moving away from it. But essentially, when I see people doing free estimates or free quotes, you're spending your own time, travel time, gas, time with the customer, providing a free service. So yes, you're selling your service, but ultimately, it's free time that you're giving to someone with the hopes of landing a job. And depending on the customer, they might be doing 5, 6, even 10 estimates or quotes, which is on the extreme end and not kind of the nature of it. But basically, I think the industry really should be charging at least something for an estimate. I know HVAC companies often charge like a $79, at least in the US, diagnostic fee if it's to troubleshoot an issue that then gets rolled into the final cost. But a lot of different contractors and service companies, at least in the US, are doing free estimates or quotes regardless. And I think it's problematic because people take advantage of it. You have a lot of tire kickers who are just saying, hey, I don't care about their time and I want to bring them out here, give me an estimate just so I can get a ballpark on what it's going to cost, but I might not even think about doing it. Or you get the type of customers that are really just looking for the cheapest price and they have no problem bringing out 10 different contractors. Ultimately, if you're kind of rolling that cost into your final estimates and invoices for all your customers you do win, the real customers are the ones that are getting hurt because that fee is bundling into them, while the bad customers, the tire kickers, the ones who are shopping around for the lowest price, are the ones that are technically benefiting from it. So to summarize, I think attaching some type of fee, even if it's small, maybe $15, $20, I think is enough just to deter the tire kickers and the ones just looking for the lowest price. Because in the end, if you're getting 10 of those $20 estimates, it adds up. And it gets people kind of focused on those three. There's that rule of getting 3 estimates and quotes that gives you a good idea of kind of a baseline. And anyone that's serious should be willing to spend between $45 and $60 at least on an estimate that will eventually really roll into their final job. And so I think it's something that everyone needs to move to, but isn't going to happen overnight, and needs to be a shift that's consciously done by all tradespeople in the industry.
Is it a case, do you think, that we should be using quoting with boundaries, is one way to put it? Because a very easy way to get access to more customers as a trade business, right, is just to do things for free. I mean, many different industries around the world do that. So what you're saying is that you really need to sort out who's serious and who's not, so you're not wasting time, and then that time that has to be accounted for is not getting charged then in effect to the serious customers.
Yeah, and I think that's ultimately where it started from, right? Someone didn't have enough work, and so they said, hey, I'll do a free estimate just to get me out there so I can try selling you on it. And obviously people use estimates as an opportunity to sell themselves to you on why they should go with you. But ultimately, if one person is charging and one person's doing a free estimate, it's tough to battle. And that's why I say this isn't an easy change and has to be industry-wide. But it obviously comes with complications.
Now, in the space that you operate, you're seeing a lot of different trade companies across a few different sectors within the trade space. Do you have any thoughts on where we're going as a whole in the next 5 to 10 years? Because as this technology wave comes for the trade space, I think we're going to change in some way, but what are your thoughts going forward on the significant changes and what we might need to do or do more or focus on to make sure that we don't get gobbled up by technology that's coming more and more, readily available?
Yeah, I think ultimately there's a few factors that come into play that's changing the landscape. One is just the power of technology recently. In the last 5-7 years, mobile phones have become a lot more powerful and the networks have been able to support a lot more. So what you couldn't do 10 years ago, you can now do today in terms of mobile applications. And so just the ability to do things on your phone and remotely have become much more possible. And so that's why FieldPulse came into place, because we saw that mobile phones were much more capable and could do things on the fly that computers could do. And now you're there. But at the same time, you're seeing a huge wave of the mobile apps of everything, right? There's an app for everything, and there's Uber and Airbnb and all these different applications that people are now using daily as part of their life. And automatically, even when you're buying something or looking for something, sometimes the first thing people think of is, is there an app for that? And I think some of that type of behavior is influencing expectations around the industry from the consumer side. They're thinking, I'm looking now for a plumbing contractor. I'm looking for an electrician or HVAC or any type of specialty business. Where am I going to look? And people who maybe previously looked in more non-digital means are now looking for digital means, whether that's as simple as going to Google and searching, but also in terms of looking for applications to find customers. But it also goes to the whole experience in general with how Uber treats the customer experience from where you know who's coming to pick you up, you know where they are along the way. You can track them, you know the cost, everything's digital, you're getting emails of it. It's creating an expectation with consumers in general in terms of how they do business. They want to be able to see everything. They want to have it at their fingertips in an app or via email or text messages. And I think customers will continue to expect digitization across the industry. And so while FieldPulse is more on the contractor side and dealing with it, there are aspects that kind of play into the consumer side that need to meet their expectations. So things like customer communications, on the way notifications that show you where they are as they make their way on to your house, text message notification, updates, photos, digital signature, sign off for estimates, invoices, online payments. All these aspects are not only helpful from the contractor perspective in terms of making things easier and more seamless and more organized, but in reality, the consumer's expecting it. A lot of consumers don't want to be paying cash. A lot of people don't even carry cash anymore. People don't carry checkbooks around with them. They have a credit card and they're expecting to pay. And if you're not physically with them, they also expect to be able to pay online via an email. And making it inconvenient for the customer, whether it means them having to find their checkbook, write a check, or go to the ATM proactively to get cash for you, it creates a negative experience. So ultimately, I think the digital trend of what you said, what's changing in the last 5-10 years, has really impact expectations for consumers. And it 100% plays into how contractors need to handle their customers as well.
Yeah, just to back over a couple of the key points that you mentioned then, because when I'm talking to other trade business owners, sometimes there can be a little bit of a negative opinion on some of this technology stuff that's coming into play, and that thought or that train of thinking that's sort of along the lines of it'll never happen to us. But you're 100% right with the advancement in mobile technology and also with the GPS locating stuff. That's part of the direct reason that companies like Uber, as you mentioned, and also your Airbnbs of the world have been able to grow so fast, right? Because once that actually becomes possible, then industries figure out how to use this new technology and can leverage their efforts multiple times in comparison to what they used to be able to do.
Oh, definitely. I think across the board, especially when you're comparing to pen and paper or any type of fragmented system or kind of non-mobile system, I think just the aspect of consumers always having their phones with them and always being able to do what they want at their fingertips on their phone is really the reason behind all this shift. And on the contractor side, if talking about do we need to move over to this, I think it goes beyond kind of the consumer demand. It goes to how you stay organized, how you find all the information you want, how you keep your team organized. It's a data source that's shared across all your team members wirelessly across the city or the state, wherever you are, that you can't really replicate with pen and paper fragmented solutions. And so whether you want to move to it or not, I think there's concrete benefits of aspects that you just can't even replicate with pen and paper.
Yeah, it's super interesting, isn't it? Because real data in the trade space, I don't think that we've ever really had the capabilities to collect data to the level that we can now, and therefore we haven't been able to use the data. And data is the key, is the king, if you like, to everything sort of going forward. And if you don't have that information to then make business decisions off, you're sort of in this position where I guess you're guessing about a lot of things, right? And you're going to, just on sheer efficiencies alone, you're going to be in this space where you'll lose to someone who does use them, if you don't go to it. I'm a pretty big believer in this way of doing things.
Definitely. I think across the board, if you don't have access to your data, I think what you said comes into play in a few sources, right? Just data of your own based on sales, jobs performed, timing, not having that insight into it can be critical and is an issue that we see with a lot of contractors. But also on the other side, being able to have that data ready for your customers is critical. The reality situation with estimates or quotes or proposals, whatever you want to call it, is that who's ever most reliable, who's ever quickest to respond and get the information the customer needs is often the one who wins the job. You think it's who's ever the best tradesman, but that's not the case. If you can be the service provider that provides your quote the quickest, that provides it the most detailed, that gets back to emails the fastest, that can update their quotes and send out new ones faster, is often the one who wins it. And it's much easier to do that with technology, where you're updating it live in the system, where if you get a call from the customer and you're out in the field, you can just look up their estimate right on your phone and see exactly the details and know what you're talking about. You can see all your notes, all your history, and you can update it and send a new one. There's no more waiting a day to get back to the office to send an update while someone else is winning the job. I think that's just the reality of it, is that speed wins a lot, and reliability wins, and being able to get what they need quickly is critical. And it's just a lot of things you can't do if you're not digital.
Yeah, speed and convenience in a world that time is becoming more and more important are certainly going to be winning factors in whichever way that they play out. And that's not specific just to the trade space, but of course, every business really across the world, I would have thought. So the companies that you're running into at the moment who are starting to look at, FieldPulse as an example and going digital, is there anything that, apart from obviously the fact that they're looking at these things, is there anything else that you're seeing that separates the average contractor from the really high performing and by extension highly profitable ones? Is there any trends there?
Yeah, I think the biggest trend is really knowing your profits. And it might sound crazy, but we see that many, I don't want to say most, but many contractors really don't know their margins. They don't know what they're making on a job. They don't know whether a job is profitable or not, which type of jobs are more profitable, what they're really spending on a job. And it's really killer, because you end up doing different services, but you have to know the true costs, and kind of winging it or just looking at parts and adding that in isn't the true measure of profit. And then it also comes into how you sell your service. People who are doing time and materials, we believe, are not getting the profit margin that they can get versus doing a bundled offer. But the thing with doing a bundled offer with some type of flat rate is that you really have to know the costs that are going into it to be able to create that margin and sell your service. While time and materials is often easier because you're literally just taking the materials and your time, you're not getting the profit that you could be from someone who really knows their profit margins, their cost models, and are able to put together packaged services that they're selling.
Now, these bundled offers and doing multiple things tends to be, I think, a US way of going about business, I guess. I don't think a lot of contractors here in Australia are doing that. Can you just explain what you mean by a bundled offer for anyone that may not understand that?
Yeah, so I think most of it really comes in the flat rate price books that are becoming more common in the US. I'm not sure if they're common in Australia, but we've got some things brewing that we're planning to take to Australia very shortly that will include that, and really a sales tool built around that. But the idea with the flat rate price book is that a lot of the times you're actually working off of kind of the mental aspect of pricing with customers. The psychology of pricing with customers. Because what you're doing when you're going in to provide a service or a job, you're using your price book that's already predefined the price or cost for your service, and you're presenting it to them in a different way. So rather than providing a traditional estimate that's broken down, if it's a service that you provide that's more bundled, you can predefine these services into your price book. And it plays into different things. First, you're not breaking out all the different components that lets people kind of measure up hourly times and hourly wages and looking at the cost of materials and comparing it to what they could get online. But on the flip side, there's a type of price integrity built in where if you're pulling from a predefined list that they see, they don't believe that you're just pulling numbers out of a hat based on what you look like or where you live or how much money they think you have. And it's a strong tool with consumers because they trust it. It's a predefined pricing that you've set forth, and you're not pulling out of a hat. And that's what you're going with based on something that you've already figured out. And it's shown to actually increase profits by getting more acceptance, although it ends up being a higher charge. And it's more certain for the customer than if you were to do time and materials. But it really starts with knowing your costs, knowing your margin you want to receive, and putting that together ahead of time.
Built-in integrity. I haven't heard it put quite that way before, but I understand what you're saying. So if everybody's paying the same amount for, job X, then it's a more integral way in their eyes of buying a service, right? Knowing that the person down the road's not paying 80% or whatever of the price that they're quoted. Have I got my head around that?
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you get to a point where really everyone is charging that same price and there's price integrity across the board there, then there's really no need to shop around. And so you don't need all those quotes and proposals, and you're really coming in, you're saying, this is the price, you're going to have to get it done. And this is what it's probably going to be for most customers. Do you want to wait or do you want me to do it now? And so the price integrity comes from them believing that you're not trying to scam them, because that's a price that's already set. And it doesn't have to be an industry-wide thing. It could be your own personal set. But if it's a consistent price where they don't feel like they're being scammed, then it has a lot of value in the consumer's eyes.
Can you talk a little bit about your journey to the point where you started FieldPulse? Because you don't have a trade background. You come from the tech world.
Correct. So I feel like most founders in this, they either come from one side or the other. They either come from a trade background or they come from a technical background. And either way, you're kind of learning the other end or you have an interest in the other end. So I came from a more technical background. I did IT consulting in the mobility space for a large consultant firm. And so we were dealing with mobile applications and enabling companies to use mobility across the board. And in there, during my projects, one specifically being at a large telecommunications company, we were dealing with small business mobile applications. Some were in-house products that the company sold, and some were third-party solutions that were all designed for small businesses and were all designed for mobile applications. And at the time, I had a pretty good idea of what was out there. A lot of old solutions that were on-premise data storage. A lot of them were computer-based, very old. If they had a mobile component, it wasn't very good. And a lot of them were really focused on the larger end of the market. And I had seen and worked with different contractors in different ways. And I'd seen that they weren't using anything on the smaller end of the business. They were making a lot of mistakes with handwritten invoices where the math was incorrect, losing historical data, not having the right dispatching or job information sent between team members. And so I saw a large gap on the small end of the market with kind of a mobile-first technology. And so coming from a mobile-first background, the first prototype I worked on was mobile on iOS. And so it started with an interface where you could manage your business from your phone out in the field, because a lot of the smaller owner-operators aren't sitting in an office necessarily. They are out doing estimates, quotes, talking to customers, collecting payments, checking on projects if they're project-based work. And so these computer-based applications were almost useless to them. And so it started on mobile, but then we quickly carried it across to Android and then to the web as well and created a full suite and went from there. But like you said, it was a technology-first background. You either kind of start on one side or the other, but I think learning how you want to design the software based on the market's requirements is more effective than knowing the market's requirements and then trying to learn how to develop software. And in the end, you can create a better software application that has a better design, that's more intuitive, that's easy to learn, easy to onboard, and really efficient. Because if you're out in the field, we can't have an application that takes 20 clicks to do a simple task. So designing in a way where you can update statuses, attach files and photos, add comments, clock in, clock out, create estimates, create invoices, all these things. You have to be able to do them quickly from your phone wherever you are.
And did you test all the idea initially in terms of how maybe the market would accept the mobile solution? Or was it more along the lines of, I can see this is just being done so badly at the moment, there's got to be a better way, and you started building it?
I think a little bit of both. I think naturally in an industry that's been very pen and paper heavy for so long, you have to kind of prove it first before someone will just go in and say, yes, I'm going to move to this. But in the end, if you take kind of all of our modules from the job scheduling and dispatching to the customer management, to the estimates and invoices, to the payments, to the timesheets, to the customer communication, all those aspects. There's so much value in moving digitally to a mobile application or full application that in the end, when someone's looking at it, it's hard not to see the value. And then it's a matter of whether you're willing to make the move and move your team over. We think it's an easy transition. Our onboarding and sign up and use, we think, is very quick, and we have team members ready to get people going. And we have customers who sign up and start fully using it within 10, 15 minutes, because all it takes is a little bit of setup, and then they're creating estimates and invoices and scheduling job for their team members. And that's where we saw a big obstacle, is that other solutions needed to be installed on your computer, needed to be trained by someone in person. But if you design it right and you make it mobile first and you make it cloud-based, and you have the tools and the team ready via online chats and video support and screen share demos, that you can get people up and running really quickly. And that's one of the biggest obstacles. A lot of our customers don't have the time during the day, don't have the time to get people together to look at it. And so if they're going to move, it needs to be something that they can do quickly and easily and doesn't cause pain across the team, because in the end, you have to get everyone on board or it's not going to work.
Yeah, it's interesting, the intuitive part, because implementing software in a trade business only just a few years ago was sort of a process that kind of aged you like 5 or 10 years. You know what I mean? I think there's been a lot of late nights and a lot of red wine and probably other things consumed trying to get some of these tech products in the early stages to a place where you can actually use them. It's extremely challenging, but what you're saying now is that the ground has really been broken, right, in the mobile space. And it's probably partly because it is mobile that you can't, I guess, have as many options as like a computer or desktop sort of solution. So it does become a lot easier to use.
Yeah, I actually agree with that 100%. And so I spent the first few years designing it myself, and I've since passed it over to a dedicated product manager. But I found designing for mobile almost easier because you're confined to a very specific space. You can't put a ton of buttons, and so you have to streamline it so that it's a few actions that are really the key components and simplify it. So ultimately, for the guys out in the field that you're training, you're only having them do a few certain actions, and you try to replicate a design that is somewhat similar, at least, to any other native application on their phone, so that it is very familiar. But as you can imagine, you get a broad range of people. Some people get it on the first try and it's like, oh yeah, no problem. I push this button, I change the status, I upload a photo, whatever. And others barely use their phone, and it's a little bit more of a process. And ultimately, we do see a little bit of backlash from some team members who don't like the increased traceability and accountability, which we think is awesome for managers. But obviously, if you're getting tracked on something you don't want to get tracked on, there's some pushback on there. But because now your team members, their location is tagged when they're clocking in or clocking out. Their location is tagged when they change the status of a job, so that the manager knows where they were when they started the job, where they were when they finished the job, and see the full job duration. And so all this accountability can sometimes have a little bit of pushback, but ultimately it needs to start from the top down, from ownership or management, saying, this is how we're going to do things. This is how we're going to operate. If we want to compete, if we want to move quickly, if we want to be efficient, we're going to move, and you're either in or out.
And I think that transparency thing is going to be very good for the good operators, because I'm just thinking out aloud here that if you are a effective and efficient employee within a company, and that data is then available at times like employee review and the like, you're going to be able to pretty significantly and with authority put forward your case for possibly a pay increase, because you can demonstrate clearly how you are performing better than maybe some other people. So sometimes those negative things, if you can just think completely opposite, there's going to be probably, I can see already, some quick wins for some good people.
Definitely. It's so easy now to see how many jobs people are doing, how fast they're doing, their average duration time, their average invoice amount. depending on the type of industry, I know that's big in HVAC where there's a lot of upselling. And so if you are on the positive side of it, it can be a good thing. I think ultimately there has to be a balance, right? When you're having to be tracked more, you need a little bit more. You need something in return, because ultimately, if you're held strict to very certain hours of only working, then they have to negotiate on their side what makes it a full-time job and worth it for them. But you don't want to know how many times I've heard from customers, owners, managers talking about their concerns with team members that are clocking in for time where they're still at home, or they've already left and headed home, but the owner has no idea where they are and they can't validate it. But with tools like this, when you're clocking in or clocking out, or even changing the status of the job, it geotags your location. So there's really no way to fake that. So they're either hanging out at the customer's home or they're actually working.
So Australia's not the only place in the world that's figured out how to fudge their timesheets in a manual sense, right? That happens in America too. That's surprising.
Yep, definitely.
How did you go about the initial mapping out of the product? And I know this is like a technology question, but you've recognised that there's a need here for all the reasons that we've been discussing. What do the first stages look like? Like, is it a spreadsheet? Do you draw pictures with arrows with phone screens on a notepad? Like, right back at the start when you were building the product, where does it begin?
Yeah, for me, it started with an application called Sketch, and it's a Mac application that's meant for designing for high fidelity, full UI mockups, and really creating those mockups of how you want to look like. Something that's a bit different about me than others is that I didn't really want to look at other solutions, or at least competitors, and how they did it, because I wanted to figure out what I thought was the best design based off the process that I see. And looking back, I don't know if that was a right or wrong decision, but ultimately, I think you can learn bad habits from looking at existing people, but also good habits. But ultimately, I started fresh. I thought, what is the goal? And a lot of it was looking at experience in the past, even from applications that weren't mobile directive, but looking at applications that had that kind of same structure where you have multiple types of records that relate to each other. And that was one of the critical components for me in FieldPulse altogether and in this industry, is that you have different records that really need to relate to each other. And that's where I think a lot of the value of the application comes from. And what I mean by that is that you have customer records, you have jobs, you have estimates, you have invoices, you have payments, you have timesheets, you have projects, you have subtasks, you have customer communications. All these different records have to interrelate so you can find them and they're traceable, and you can see the historical nature of it, and you can see how they all connect. And that's one of the problems of using fragmented solutions as a contracting company, is that you might schedule jobs, but they're not linked to your CRM where all their data is. Or you might have estimates and invoices, but they're not linked to your CRM. You might have timesheets, but they're not linked to your jobs that they're clocking into. And so when I started, one of the key focuses was really seeing, okay, what are the different types of records that we'll be creating? How do they relate? And that's where I really started the foundation that they need to be multi-related to each other. Is there a primary record? Is it the customer? Is it the job? And then really going from there and how you relate it out. But to answer your question, it really started with a design application in terms of really mapping it out and trying a ton of different versions. If you looked at my earliest versions, it looks kind of nothing like it does today. But ultimately, you're starting with the prototype and seeing how the usability and the features kind of function. And then you adapt and move forward as you test it out.
It's sort of that Mac versus PC kind of struggle, isn't it? Designing a machine that works in terms of a PC versus a machine that people want to use, which would be a Mac, right?
Yeah.
And I guess in the long run, they've both actually worked out pretty well, but they've certainly had their moments in time in terms of leading the industry.
I mean, I think that's one of the key issues or differences in software solutions is that a lot of the old model, or people who are not kind of software and design focused, they think of features and then they try to create something that just covers every feature possible without really thinking about the design first and how it interacts and the usability. And it comes at a cost, right, of not being able to find certain items, requiring too many clicks but really starting with the right framework so that things build outwards is important. And that's also something that we kind of struggle with a bit today. Maybe struggle is a strong word, but you always want to create an application that's simple and easy to use. But then every day we get 30 customer recommendations on features they want. And so we continue to build them and we're always improving the product. But you have to find the right balance of ease of use, simple to onboard and get going with robust feature set. And it's a challenge that kind of sinks a lot of applications where once they get to the point where they continue to add features and more features, they lose that touch being easy to use. And so we find the balance by kind of having an unlock method where when you first get in the application, we keep it simple. But if you want these add-ons, if you want these extra features, you can enable them. And so you kind of learn them over time. So things like timesheets and custom forms and your customer portal and payments, all these are kind of add-ons and extra features that we don't want to bog you down with initially once you get on because they'll just be confusing, but are things that if you want, you can add on and then learn.
So does FieldPulse automatically unlock more features depending on how you use and how much you use the application?
It does a bit changing based on industry, where we're actually revamping our onboarding right now so that actually based on the questions you answer for us, we're going to change the application and how we teach it to you. So if a company does more service work than project-based work, they'll get a different type of workflow in the system. If you do more jobs where you're providing verbal estimates versus actual written estimates, it's going to change the workflow a bit. And so we're continuously adapting it. But one thing we're definitely looking at is how do we segment our customers based on different criteria and then change the application for them. So a lot of advanced kind of behind the scenes things that customers will never see, but should improve their experience. So if we think that they are someone who's looking for something advanced, we're going to automatically make the application for them more advanced off the get-go. Well, if we think there's someone who needs it more simple to get going, we're going to shut things down. And so this is something we're evolving and changing right now.
It's pretty common with technology applications, right, that things get unlocked as you do go along. I saw that, as an example, YouTube not so long ago released the ability to post stories like Instagram, but you cannot do that unless you have 1,000 subscribers. So what YouTube's really saying is that once you've used the platform and you've got to the point where you can, to some degree, create good content on that platform, then we will give you more things to use. So it's not exactly translatable to what you're saying with FieldPulse, but it's that way of thinking, right? And the ability to, from your side, customize the application for your clients and trade-based users is incredibly powerful if you can do that the right way.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, sometimes you want to protect them from themselves, right? Like
That's a big part of it, I suppose, too.
Because if they were to start up and you were to say, okay, do you want all these features? They'll say, yes. And they load the application and it looks crazy and is hard to learn versus kind of taking it chunk at a time and starting with the basics and then adding on the extra components and having it evolve and learn it as you go can often be less daunting and more successful. Because ultimately, our goal with the application is to get them successfully onboarded so that they're like, yes, I can use this. This is going to work for me and going to add value to my business, rather than I don't know if I can learn this and I don't know if I can train my team on this and this is going to take months. We want to get them fully using it within a few days.
And what does that onboarding process look like? Is it all online? I mean, do you spend time physically with some people to understand them better? How has that been put together?
Yeah, so we have a 14-day free trial where you go right on the site. You literally just put in your email address and company name, and then it starts a trial. And from there, we have team members ready to assist you if you need it. And that is from answering questions in our online chat that's built into the application. We can get on phone calls and chat with you, or we can do live demos with you. But on the flip side, we have a lot of self-help. So we have videos that show you how to use certain features. We have help center articles that explain features, pop-ups, and bubbles within the application. really it depends on how they want to learn. Some people don't want to interact with anyone and they just ignore our outreach, and that's fine. They'll just read the help center, test it out, learn it on their own. We think it's intuitive enough where if someone is good with technology, they can often just figure it out on their own. While if someone is not great with technology, they always have us here to help them, and we don't charge extra for it. And we'd love to get people fully onboarded and ready. We'll help you input your information, import your customers, import your item lists, add your team members, set up your invoices and logos and contracts. We're here to get you going because ultimately we think you'll stick around for a long time. And so it's worth our effort to get you fully onboarded to the point where you're taking advantage of all the features. And then we'll show you the extra stuff. We'll show you how you can take advantage of our free customer portal, our free custom forms, our payment platform, our new communication platform. And ultimately, it's to help them realize value, get their team using it, and become what we view as a successful customer.
So you're doing that 100% online, it sounds like then?
Oh, yes, correct. Just for the sake of efficiency, we do come at price point, one of the lower ends of the market, and people tell us that we're almost too cheap, but we think the economics work with our kind of online-only model. I know there are people on the other end of the spectrum like Service Titan, but they charge literally 10 times the amount and have annual contracts, and they do a lot more in person. But with our model, we think we can get people onboarded and ready to go via our online support. And so we pass that savings on to them, and hopefully they're happy with the end result.
We had a quick chat the other day. You were talking about a new communication component that you're going to build into the app. But to come out from that just for a minute, the way that you've gone about adding new features along the way is, have you got a suite of products or different parts that FieldPulse shares data with? Have I understood that correctly? Is that how you're sort of putting it together?
Yeah, so a lot of them are just free components and modules of the application, like our custom forms, our customer portal, our payments, our project management, stuff like that. But we're also working on some much larger modules that can be standalone, and we'll sell them standalone. And so things like the communication platform, and these are things that have taken us a very long time to develop, but we think are critical components, but also things that people might even want to buy standalone outside of FieldPulse just from the value. So the most recent one that we currently released in beta for existing customers is our communication platform. Basically, it's a fully integrated phone system built into FieldPulse. And we think it covers so many different pain points that it's really high value. And that's on both sides, from the manager's point of view, but also the team member's point of view.
I'm thinking that in an office scenario, a call comes in, you can just put it through to someone 4 desks away, right, if they're the right person to answer it. So I'm assuming that maybe this is a mobile version of that, right? So if a call comes in and some particular technician in another location needs to answer that call, that the call could be put through. That's purely my speculation. I know I haven't asked you specifically about this, but I assume that would be somewhere along the lines of where you're headed with it.
Yeah, so it's both mobile and computer-based. And I think the computer aspect is very powerful as well. So it's a shared phone system where you can get one or multiple phone lines. You can get one for each team member. People can share them. But the main concept is that managers and owners have full visibility into any of the lines that they want to. And what that creates is the ability to really see what's going on in a field technician's phone line, from their text messages to a customer and phone calls, and gives them the ability to jump in. And we think this helps in many different ways. So one, it's fully tied into FieldPulse. So when you get a text or you get a call, it tells you who it is from your CRM. It pulls up all their relevant information, their jobs, their estimates, their invoices, their payments, so you can pull it up immediately. You're not guessing who it is. From a manager's perspective, you have full access to their phone system, so you can really make sure that they're talking to the customer correctly. You can even jump in and talk to them on their behalf. If they're driving or they're working, it allows an office admin or owner to respond immediately, but it's still going through the same field tech's phone line. And at the same time, it gives you some protection against your team members working outside of normal hours for customers, which is a huge problem in my view in the contracting industry, is that customers get a phone number from one of the field techs, and then next time they have an issue, they'll say, hey, we want to do this on the weekend. I want to do this at night for half the cost or 3/4 the cost. And then that company is losing business. And so having the phone line not tied to their personal number and having full visibility can help fight against that. But also on the flip side, I think it's valuable for the actual field technicians themselves. If you're texting things like on the way notifications and warnings and information or just discussing with the customer, if you're using your own phone line, then your text message conversation will be filled with a bunch of random numbers. And so every day you're going through, clearing them out. And then random customers have your phone line. You're getting calls, you're getting texts in the evenings, on weekends about issues. And the field techs don't want that either. And so it gives them some protection that the phone line is actually owned and attached to the company. And so we're also releasing some advanced features around that where there are automatic replies based on the time of day, based on their schedule, their weekends, so that they're not being bothered outside of normal working hours. And so I think this is a tool that really benefits both sides between the managers and the field tech.
Very good experience for the customers too, I would think, and probably there's a bit of a wow factor there to be actually able to transfer calls around like that and at the end of the day get them the answer that they need. But this is really another important aspect to understand about technology and the plummeting price, I guess you'd say, of getting this stuff implemented, because the first system, for example, that I implemented in my office back in the day, I had to buy servers and computers and get people in to run cables. I mean, I'd hate to think how much we actually spent on a lot of this equipment. And that was just to get to the point where it kind of worked. And then we evolved to this place where we, had to provide iPads and phones and that sort of thing for our employees. But I'm just thinking now you're going even one step further and you're almost making, everyone has a smartphone these days, right? So you're almost making the hardware costs of implementing a program like this absolutely zero, because they can run it off their personal device, which means it just frees up money to either, I suppose, pass on to the customer if you like, or do more training or raise the level of your service in some way.
No, 100%, because you're not having to do servers and all that to run a system, and it's still more powerful than it ever was. It's cloud-based. You get up and running. You're not maintaining hardware or anything like that. And I'd say probably 95% of our customer base is using employee-owned devices. And so you're creating a segmentation between their personal device and their personal aspects and their business aspects that can be a risk. And I know safeguarding customer info is a big topic for business owners, and this just helps you along the way.
So you're entering a phase now where you're attempting to scale the company pretty rapidly, which is, as we've seen, there's been many tech examples, right? That's an incredibly hard thing to do. What do you think is the most challenging thing for you and the team going forward over the next maybe 12 months as you try to onboard, the way I understand it, really as many users as possible?
It's a tough question because everything's challenging, but it's most challenging. I think we always want to reinvest into the product and make it the best that we can. But at the same time, we have a goal of creating the best customer experience really from start to finish. And so we're investing on both sides of it. We've recently taken on funding, and we're actually about to take on a significant amount of more to reinvest back into the business to really improve our product and experience across the board to handle a much larger customer base that we anticipate. But naturally, I think as you grow, one thing I've talked with the team is that we want to continue to offer that kind of world-class experience that our customers expect and we think has been our kind of bread and butter, and not losing sight of that as you deal with a lot more customers. And that's something that we look at closely. And so we have to keep our numbers of our customer success team relative to the number of customers that are coming in and make sure that they're still the quality that we want and are close to our company identity. And we think we have a great bunch right now and are looking to gear up for more as well.
So 3 or 4 months ago, you took on, well, it's public information now, so it was a $2.2 million investment. What I wanted to ask was, at what point did you begin looking to take outside money? Because for reasons that I don't fully understand, that seems to be a pretty critical aspect in terms of timing to get that right in a technology company.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to bootstrap a software company, especially when you have a heavy mobile component. So if you look at our product, we actually create an Android app, an iOS app, and a web app natively with 3 different teams. So our development costs can be 2 times or 3 times a basic web application would be, because we have multiple teams and we have native iOS and native Android applications that are separate. And we did that to create the best user experience on those platforms. But because of the heavy development costs, it's very difficult to even get to market without funding. And so unless you can bankroll it all, you take on funding to get it out the door, and then you have to get to market. And it would be great to rely on word of mouth for everything, but you have to build your base somewhere, spending time on marketing and customer success. And in the end, it's a long-term game for any software company that's looking to scale. You're not looking to shop out early. You're looking at a long game in terms of getting the critical mass needed to really get things moving across the board. And so there is that capital requirement upfront to develop it. And we're never stopping building. People ask whether the product is done and released. And I say, of course it's released, but we still have our development team because we're never going to stop improving it. There's always basic components we want to improve. We're always going to improve new features and looking at cutting edge stuff. We're looking at some very advanced things around machine learning and natural language processing that we're probably a bit ways out. But anywhere that we can create substantial value, we're going to look to create it. And that's kind of the everlong component of technology in general, is that it's improving. And so if you don't stick with it and improve alongside, someone will beat you to it. So if you look at software in the space from 10 years ago and look at it to now, I think it's probably tenfold better. And so if you look 10 years from now, we need to be at that point as well.
The never-ending game, right? The technology sector, and it shows all signs of speeding up and almost no signs of slowing down, right? So that particular component of the challenge, if you like, is only going to get harder. And
there are companies like Service Titan that I believe raised a few $100 million in funding. A lot of it obviously going to capture the market, but you can't rest on your laurels when you're going up against companies like that.
It's amazing. I read the other day that Service Titan turned over in excess of $1 billion, I think I read, in the last financial year, which is...
Wow, I didn't know that.
Quite unbelievable. You probably want to check that. I don't rely on my memory for a lot of things, particularly with figures, but I'm sure that was the case.
I know their valuation was over $1 billion, which is still amazing.
Well, I may have had that confused. So
but I don't know. I'll look into that.
And anyone listening can Google that to confirm my thoughts as well.
Either way, they've definitely done an amazing job growing their business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is without question. Now, personally for you, who's been the biggest influence on your career? Have you got any mentors or people that you look for specific guidance from time to time?
The easy answer is my father. He's been in the software business for nearly 40 years.
Oh, wow.
As strange as that sounds. He has started several companies. He's worked for small companies, worked for very large public companies. Most of his experience has been more on the enterprise software side, but that's really where I got the drive to start this. And he's still very involved in what we do. And he's also our biggest fan and part of the company. I wouldn't say he's daily active as a team member, but he's daily active with me at least.
And did he always think it was a good idea from the very start?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like he almost thought it was a better idea than I did. And so that's encouraging at least. But he's always wanted me to do something, but he really loved the space, the market, the potential, the value it brings to customers, because he's obviously owned a home for such a long time and dealt with many contractors that he's seen the issues they struggle with as well and how they approach the market. I think the contracting and service business is a very competitive industry. And we see that as well. Companies going in and out of business very often. often, and it's not easy. And there's a lot of efficiencies that really helps everyone. It's not a zero-sum game. These are efficiencies that really would help everyone in the market that we think you can get out of software to make everyone more profitable and make more money.
Has it been a challenge to maintain your confidence and enthusiasm for the product? Because, well, if you're taking on funding to build, that means that you're by default spending more than you're bringing in, right? Which is not uncommon, of course, in the early stages of a tech company. But has there ever been moments where you've thought it was all too hard, or has it been easy to keep positive about the whole experience?
I mean, the process of any company is difficult to do. I think anyone who hasn't done it underappreciates the efforts and the difficulty of starting a business. And I think the sad reality is, even in the contracting space, we see this a lot where people are great tradesmen and then they say, hey, I can do this too, and start a business, and find that the costs of running a business are very different than the surface costs of being someone dispatched, and seeing the reality of it. The economics are just very different. And there's a lot of overhead and stuff you don't anticipate. But knowing into it, you have to know that it's tough and not easy. But to lose confidence, I don't think that's, if anything, I think when you look at the funding is confidence that someone believes in the same market, believes in you, and wants to reinvest into your product to make it even better and reinvest into your model. So I think specifically looking at the funding, it's definitely a confidence boost that people see a large potential and want to invest into you to build something that can be much larger than what they put in.
Yeah, that's a sure sign that you're onto a good idea, right? When people actually start giving you money, yep. That's a solid tick that you're headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
If you could click your fingers, Gabe, and have it all done, where does FieldPulse sit in, say, 10 years from now? Are we going to get to, I think we've spoken about it before on this podcast, but the ease of Uber for tradies, are we going to get to that point where it's that good, or will we fall short, or will we indeed go even beyond that?
I think it's interesting because a lot of people, before I even say what we do for contractors, kind of assume that we're in that marketplace side of it, of connecting contractors to consumers. And I could see us maybe getting to there one day, but that's a very competitive and fragmented market with a lot of unhappy customers on both sides that we've been a bit reluctant to touch. But I think long-term, we want to be the main platform for service businesses. We want, when you are starting your business or running your business, that most of your technology is coming through us, and that we're the partner that finds you not only the ecosystem add-ons to FieldPulse, which are things like payments and marketing and lead generation and review curation and all these other software solutions, whether they're in-house or from third-party companies, but really kind of your platform for finding anything you need for your business. We've gotten into partnerships on the financing side where we went and we looked for who we thought was the best financing partner and are presenting that to our customers. And to be more specific about that one, it's a company that offers on-the-spot financing for your customers. So, for example, if you're doing a $10,000 AC replacement and the customer can't afford to write a $10,000 check, which is obviously very common, you can offer on-the-spot financing through FieldPulse, through our partners, to that customer to help win the job, but not only help win the job, but often win a larger job if you're offering like a good, better, best option. But these are extensions and offerings that we want to kind of curate through our platform so that we become your partner long-term in anything technology related beyond software. And so long-term, we'd love to become kind of the standard for the industry, but we definitely have a long way to go there.
And a question that I do ask everyone, Gabe, because I want to sort of bring this to a close and be respectful of your time being the end of the day and all, although you've probably got a long night ahead of you being in the technology space and early stages of the building. If you could have one law changed or implemented, what would that be?
Yeah, so other than no free estimates, no, I'm just kidding. But probably looking at like licensing, I'd say, licensing requirements. I think on one hand, my natural instinct would be to keep governing out of licensing, but I think it's been detrimental in the industry, at least in the US, where not enough licensing allows people to be doing work and undercutting pricing that's subpar. And so having enough licensing, I know the specific trades of plumbing, electrical, and HVAC do, but some of the others do not. And so you have ultimately too low of barriers to entry to starting these businesses and performing the work. And that's not only hurting profit margins where people are undercutting prices, but it's also hurting the consumer in the end. And then which in turn hurts the integrity of the industry as a whole, where people don't think it can be trusted based on bad experiences from underqualified people. And so it's kind of a generalization to say we need tougher licensing, but it really depends on where within the space. But I think it's definitely something that can help increase profits for the good companies and create a better treatment of the industry as a whole and a better outlook of how consumers view service businesses.
Perfect. Now, is there anything you wanted to add before we wrap this up? We might actually, I might have to invite you back sometime in the future as this product continues to sort of develop. But is there anything you wanted to add for now? Anything you wanted anybody to know specifically about FieldPulse and what you're doing?
Yeah, we'd love to be back sometime. We have some news coming out very shortly that we'd love to share with your audience, especially being in Australia. It's perfect for it. So, no, other than I do have some strong opinions on how to uplift the industry as a whole. I think that's a goal for me and for us as a company. We want to improve the industry and make it more profitable, make people make more money and treat it more respectfully. But it's not an easy process. And I think it takes different people around the industry to work towards that goal.
Now, your website is fieldpulse.com and you are active, or at least you're on LinkedIn. I suppose if someone wants to find you, they can track you down there. Is that the best spot?
Yep, they can find me on there. They can chat into our website and ask for Gabe, and someone on my team will send you my way.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to let you get back to the rest of your day, Gabe. Thanks again for carving out some time and doing this. It's been great to chat, and I wish you the best of luck in this very challenging and trade space. And I really think that moving forward, that one of the key components of raising the industry in terms of standards and professionalisms is actually software that is good enough to bring the less professional people, can actually drag them through a system where the consumer sees them in a much more professional sense. So
yeah, 100%.
You're definitely tackling a big part of that equation. Thanks, Gabe. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you. Hope to be back.
Hey everybody, it's Matt again. Thanks for listening. Just a couple of things before you guys clock off. You can get all Trench Talk episodes at xrm.com.au/podcast. You can also sign up for other goodies at the same site. Just plonk your email in there and you are covered. That's X for X-ray, R for Romeo, M for Mike.com.au/podcast. If you really like what I'm bringing you, please head to iTunes, subscribe to this show and leave a review right there. And lastly, if you want to contact me directly, type the @ symbol followed by Mr. Matt Reynolds into your search bar and you'll find all the social links. Goodbye.